Good morning to the Michigan Wildcard team. My name is Maria Garnett. I live in Richmond, Virginia. This is my third year of volunteering as a judge with We the People, and I am very jealous of all of you for having this experience as students. I did not even know this existed when I was in high school. I work as a state government policy professional, so I have a lot of experience doing nonpartisan policy analysis and analyzing the performance of government programs. I'm currently a policy advisor with Virginia's Department of Criminal Justice Services.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Wong. I am a retired attorney and former judge. I'm also on the National Board of Directors for the Center for Civic Education. I was born in Detroit, but moved away when I was 8 or 9. I now live in Boise, Idaho. I'm very happy to see you all and to be here and excited to listen to your testimony.
So students, please go ahead and introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Good morning. We are very excited to be here. My name is Diane Bogdanovic.
My name is Jalen Baker.
And my name is Kasaya Mitchell, and our coach is Justin Robbins.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and read your question here for Unit 6. Thomas Hobbes noted that life in a state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. How has the human condition changed over time? And how is that change reflected in our expectations of government? Should the principles of natural rights or classical republicanism guide policy changes designed to improve the condition of all people? And what are the most pressing domestic and global challenges facing Americans today and in the future? What policies can you suggest to address them? You may begin.
Thomas Hobbes's lived experiences during the English Civil War informed a decidedly negative view of the human condition, featuring selfish creatures engaged in the struggle for survival. Therefore, Hobbesian theory favors a benevolent monarch with absolute power to reign in the uncontrolled nature of man.
Thankfully, the human condition has evolved much since. The scientific revolution sparked Enlightenment thinkers to leverage human capacity for logic and reasoning on a journey Scottish philosopher John Millar described as a natural progress from ignorance to knowledge.
Expectations of government would never be the same. As Alexander Hamilton explained in Federalist 9, the science of politics had advanced, and citizens expected government to obtain legitimate consent of the governed while protecting natural rights of citizens.
In subsequent generations, a humanistic perspective emphasized individualism and natural rights. Our modern assessment is guided by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in that humans possess an innate desire to develop beyond mere survival and into true self-actualization.
To accomplish this, the framers sought to merge the benefits of classical republicanism with natural rights principles in a uniquely American experiment. Today, we believe that only a properly maintained balance of the two philosophies can truly improve the human condition for all people.
For example, in Plato's Republic, similar to Hobbes' priorities, the order of society is favored to perpetuate small, homogeneous communities based in civic virtue, while stability and order would result from classical Republican priorities. They sacrifice individualism in ways citizens will not tolerate.
Hobbes' ideas also inspired the genius of leveraging human nature to enhance capacity for self-governance, explained by James Madison in Federalist 51. In the American system, Madison asserts that ambition must be made to counteract ambition, and that auxiliary precautions balance the risks in government.
However, we recognize an inherent paradox in balancing the needs of a society against the rights of individuals, and believe that society is not currently at equilibrium. Citizens must realize that only by reasserting the common good can people truly enjoy their own natural rights.
This means emphasizing the fact that the United States of America cannot endure on natural rights theory alone. A world with natural rights run amok risks reversion to the state of nature, which fails to strike down injustice and features no consensus on right and wrong, ensuring the nasty, brutish existence Hobbes described.
The challenge of maintaining equilibrium is ongoing. While we must prioritize ending the COVID pandemic globally, we are also concerned about the problem of authoritarianism and natural rights abuses in places like the Philippines, China, and Myanmar. History teaches us that confrontations between free societies and authoritarian systems are inevitable and the consequences could be dire.
However, in order to speak out credibly on the world stage, the United States must first reestablish its own equilibrium. Issues of economic inequality, healthcare access, and disparities in civil rights are all related to the prioritization of the individual over the collective benefit of society and require policy solutions.
For example, while the U.S. has made some progress for the LGBTQ community through the Obergefell v. Hodge ruling, bans on conversion therapy in 20 states, and Executive Order 1404, these are merely a beginning. Stronger federal laws banning discrimination, nationwide education on inclusivity, and expanded constitutional protections remains needed.
This will place the United States on a stronger footing to speak out globally for the LGBTQ+ community, whose members are victims in about 17% of hate crimes, endure restrictions on marriage, and face punishment or death in 68 countries for same-sex acts.
Thank you for your time, and we are eager to discuss these issues with you further.
Great, thank you so much. So you mentioned explicitly and also implicitly that the framers really sought to merge these two philosophies of natural rights and classical republicanism. Can you give me some specific examples of how that merger or that attempt at balancing the two is reflected in the Constitution and the structure of government in the United States?
Well, the way we see it is that historically there is a pendulum moving between natural rights and classical republicanism. And one perfect example of it steering too far would be individualism during the Roaring '20s, in which you had the super elite juxtaposed to the extremely poor working class with no natural rights whatsoever.
The framers sought to balance classical republicanism with natural rights theory. I'd like to reference back to Federalist 9 when Alexander Hamilton references to the science of politics. This is the basis for what we know as poli-sci, and it provides the grounding and everything we can really ground our basis in for classical republicanism and natural rights theory, and allows for the framers to expand upon that in the Constitution, but also provide a basis for future thinkers to leverage human capacity to not only improve the human condition, but also intrinsically motivate themselves.
I believe the Bill of Rights is the perfect example of the balance between classical republicanism and natural rights, because the anti-federalists believed that without a Bill of Rights, there would be a lack of natural rights in our society. And, well, obviously the Federalists eventually agreed.
Okay, if I heard correctly in your 4-minute testimony, you used the word balance frequently, and that there needed to be a balance between natural rights and classical republicanism. My question to you is, are we there? Do we have the proper balance between the two of them in the United States of America today? And can you give me an example of the proper balance?
We definitely do not. A perfect example of this would be in our own state of Michigan, in which we had protesters that were arguing for their own natural rights against the classical Republican values of trying to use COVID masks and lockdowns in order to ensure the safety of society. Whereas we've seen a lot of individuals feel that it is in their natural rights to go and protest against this, even though this isn't exactly natural rights, because it's putting other people's lives in jeopardy.
As my colleague had stated, and reverting back to our 4-minute, we state that natural rights theory run amok causes a reversion back to the state of nature. And that is completely what we saw in Michigan, but also in the events on January 6th, in which armed protesters and vigilantes, if they would like to call themselves, stormed our Capitol and go against our federal process, which inherently harms the natural rights and liberty of all people within our nation. And that's why there needs to be a balance between natural rights and classical republicanism, because classical republicanism provides the grounding that all people are able to succeed, where natural rights comes in is if you're able to actualize in ourselves based on our explanation for Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Throughout history, we can see different examples of the two theories being unbalanced. A great example would be after World War II with the Japanese American internment camps. Although it was a very classical Republican theory to intern people, it also jeopardized a lot of natural rights.
Great.
Thank you.
I have another question tied to your testimony. So you talked about the legitimate consent of the governed and how important that is. What do you think is the greatest challenge to the legitimacy of the consent of the governed today? And how would you address that challenge?
The greatest challenge definitely comes with income inequality and the lack of education. We do see in our own state of Michigan and Detroit, the poverty rate is at 30.6%, with the national average being at 9.2%. Now, we see this in the school system because they have over $300 million that they need in infrastructure repairs, yet they cannot get that. And as a result, we have over 60% of students that are chronically absent, meaning that they miss 10% or more of their school year, which obviously will reflect poorly in the future.
Going off of what Diane was saying about education standards, there really is a lack of civic education in our society, and that is detrimental to our youth population. And transferring to the adult population, it inherently creates an uninformed public that is able to stand in civic virtue and have a educated and informed conversation with one another about policies that need to get passed. That also inherently affects our voting abilities and the ability to have a decision that represents the common good, like we reference back to in classical Republican priorities.
Going off of what Jalen says, this lack of civic education creates a lot of polarity between Americans today, and this causes a lot of problems, and the media does not help with this. It usually gives one side or the other without giving true information.
To continue with the media, we do have modern philosopher Noam Chomsky's book, Manufacturing the Consent of the Governed, which basically explains that people do not know what's going on, and they do not know that they do not know what's going on, because media not only filters information to the public, but it tailors it to the individual using their pins and whatnot, like modern technology, to basically keep people exposed to their same beliefs.
Discussing the filter that Diane had mentioned, I'd like to reference back to the First Amendment. The First Amendment is the key to establishing the marketplace of ideas within our society, in which we provide a filter for ideas to really bring out the truth. But as we've seen now, that people use the First Amendment as a projection of their natural rights, when in reality, it's supposed to be a projection of your natural rights. However, it's supposed to also protect the will of the people in other ways that would not otherwise be reflected through the marketplace of ideas.
Well, I'm confident that you'll say that more civic education will improve the income inequality and the high level of poverty in the state of Michigan. What other governmental policies will improve those two big issues in Michigan and elsewhere?
Well, I think we could implement a policy more about mental health, because we do know that people who are in poverty, well, they're at the basic level of Maslow's needs, so they cannot really afford to get the proper mental health treatment that they do. And as we all know, mental health rates have been rising significantly with the introduction of technology and the widening world. That's very anxious. It makes people very anxious.
We have the fortunate ability.
All right, that is time. Thank you.
All right,
Great.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. We're going to give you some of our feedback now. I have to say, I think you have done the best by far today of both really equally balancing, how you shared the responsibility for delivering your opening statement and for responding to our questions. That was great. Keep that up. And similarly, I think you're the first team today that's made any references to any Federalist Papers, let alone multiple Federalist Papers. The variety of historical examples, constitutional references, talking about Korematsu and the internment of Japanese American, there was a depth and a richness to the types of evidence that you cited that really showed me that you understood what you were talking about. So great job with that. As for constructive feedback that I have, sometimes continuing to add on may not actually help if you really have answered our question, so I can think of many other questions I would have loved to be able to ask you, but we couldn't because you each did make sure to say something on all of our questions. So maybe keep that in mind. You don't always have to say something in response to any specific question. But again, I am just so impressed with how well you all did today and how many examples you used from your own personal lived experience in your locality and with your state government. Absolutely keep up that good work. So great job.
I agree. I thought your references to your issues in Michigan were very well done. I mean, we expect students to know what the issues are in their home state, but surprisingly enough, having done this national competition on multiple occasions, a lot of times the students don't reference their own particular state. And so I really did enjoy that. I will also say that that you are fairly organized in answering your question. I will tell you that Maria and I will listen to 14 teams today, one right after the other. And given that, it's important that we're able to follow along to make sure that you're answering the questions. And so far, you've done the best in answering the question. I was able to follow along and go through my progression of my notes and answering the question. So I thought that was very well done. You're absolutely right. That balance between natural rights and classical republicanism is what's necessary. And then whether or not we have the right balance is a big issue. But we're going to rely on young people like you who are bright and articulate and knowledgeable, and we'll continue with your civic education, because it doesn't stop with just this program. There's a lot more to do, as you can see from what's happened in the last several years. So good job. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I enjoyed it very much. Good job.